How's everybody doing?
All right, thank you.
It was a really cool presentation. I like the flip where it turned out that we were in carbon fields the whole time. I felt like the last one felt sort of like one of those mind-blowing twist movies.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're going to be talking about WordPress migrations. I call it beginner to advanced, but the reality of it is that the main thing that we're going to be getting into, which is a manual migration, where we're actually getting our files in the database and moving it somewhere else, that's advanced as it gets. If you can do that, then you can essentially move your site anywhere. In my role at WP Engine, I help people with migrations, and we have a tool to automate it. But if for some reason it doesn't quite work right, I've never seen it fail where it's like, hey, can you get us your files? Can you get us the database? Done. Works every time, because really that's all a WordPress site is. It's a group of files and it's a database. So if you have the ability to get in and download those things, then you can move your site anywhere. So we'll dive right into that.
That's your question about
yes.
that. Doesn't Updraft give you those files?
Yeah, so there are plugins that can do it. We're going to focus on if for some reason none of these plugins are working, or if you don't have access to the site, this all will work. So we're gonna touch on some plugins, but for the most part, we're gonna be self-sufficient site migrators. So no matter what state your site is in, as long as you can actually get in through SFTP, you've got access to the database, you can move your site. So cool. One of the important factors is, where are you moving from? That is critical because are you on WordPress.com or WordPress.org? And the way that you know you're on WordPress.com is if you actually go to WordPress.com to access your site. Do you actually have database access? Depending on your host, they may or they may not, but for the most part, your host should give you some sort of database access, either through PHPMyAdmin as a common one, or anything like that. And if not, it's generally something they can help you with. You can just say, I want an export of my database. They should be able to get that to you, unless it's something like it's not WordPress. Like for instance, like Wix or Squarespace or something. That's not going to really work because it's not WordPress. So this is WordPress to WordPress. Do you have FTP or SFTP access? And actually, this is sort of a trick question, because if they have FTP access, that's not good. And if they only have FTP access, that's really bad, because it is super insecure. You're basically transferring your files totally unencrypted, and a bad malicious actor could sniff that out, and that's no good. SFTP is the best. That does it over a secure encrypted layer. So if your host does not have SFTP, that's a good reason to migrate away anyway. There's another thing called FTPS. It's sort of secure. It's better than FTP. SFTP is the best. Cool. So again, if you are on WordPress.com, your login screen will tell you, it will say WordPress.com up here. It'll look like a normal WordPress login. This is kind of what you're used to, but it will also say back to WordPress.com right there. So with WordPress.com, the reason why we need to know if it's on that is because you do not have file access, you do not have database access to WordPress.com. So we're going to need to do something a little different with those. So I'm going to touch on that real briefly, just to make sure that if you all are interested in moving away from WordPress.com to a self-hosted site, then this is going to be very important. All right, so you're going to use a tool. It's called WordPress Importer. It is a plugin that they make. It's not quite default functionality, but it's pretty much default. And actually on WordPress.com, it comes with your site. You don't need to install it. WordPress.org, you can get this. You can just install it like a normal plugin, but it is part of WordPress.com. There's a key thing about it. Moving from WordPress.com to WordPress.org is a little bit of a hassle. The reason why is because WordPress Importer is nice. It gets you your posts You can get your authors, you can get your media, but it does not move any plugins you may be using. It doesn't move your themes. It doesn't move any configurations for your plugins or your themes. It doesn't move users who are not authors. So that can be a challenge. There are some other plugins probably that fill in some of those gaps, but a lot of the time you're going to end up having to rebuild some functionality of your website. And real quick, I'm going to show you WordPress.com's own, let me get out of the, it's in full screen. WordPress.com has this great site, move.wordpress.com, and it takes you by the steps on how to move a site from WordPress.com to WordPress.org. So this is using the WordPress Importer tool. You go and you say, I want to export it. This will download it as an XML file. And then you go to your new site, wherever that is. You will, generally when you want to migrate to a site, it's easiest to set up WordPress on your new host so that you have a place to move things into. Most web hosts, either if they don't install WordPress for you, they have like a one-click button, and then WordPress also has a famous 5-minute manual setup, so it should be pretty easy to get WordPress set up. So once you have that on your new host, you install the WordPress Importer plugin, like we mentioned, and then there's just a button that says Upload. You upload the XML file, and that will begin the import process, and that will bring over all of your posts, that'll bring over your authors, that'll bring over some of that content, but again, it won't move over your plugins, or your theme, or your plugin settings, or your theme settings, so you will need to do that all over again. Kind of a hassle, but at least it's something. You can get your content, you don't need to rewrite literally all of your posts, so that is definitely helpful. Cool. Does anybody have any questions about the moving away from WordPress.com? Yes?
Might be a naive question, but if it doesn't export all those plugins, what's the main top advantage of having it on your own self-hosted site?
So WordPress.org, so WordPress.com versus WordPress.org is a pretty big topic. So I'll go in just real briefly some of the key points why somebody would want a WordPress.org site. WordPress.org is self-hosted. It gives you a lot more control over your site. WordPress.com does allow you to do some plugin installs now, but you are still very limited in how you can use it. With WordPress.org, you have the full software and you can do anything that you want with it. You can actually go into your files, you can customize them, you can do whatever you want with them. You can go into the database, you can make all kinds of changes there. Basically, WordPress.com is a very good way to host your site. It's a great way to even host a free WordPress site. But for people who are looking to do some more advanced things with WordPress, or scale it up, or they're going to make, they're going to want to be doing some more powerful things with it, you really have to go to WordPress.org. So at some point, all of that will need to happen. And unfortunately, it is kind of a hassle. But again, at least you get something out of it. It's not, you have to recreate the entire site. And it's just a matter of installing plugins, which WordPress thankfully makes pretty easy. So that's, I would say that recreating your posts is likely the most time-consuming part that you would have to deal with. And fortunately, WordPress makes it so you don't have to do that. Cool. Any other questions?
Well, sometimes it's not posts, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it's not posts, sometimes it's a corporate website with pages of...
Yeah, that too. That's, yeah, I was being, that's correct. It's not just posts. Basically all of your content I'm including in posts. All post types, pages, all kinds of things like that. So that's a good point. Yes?
Are there any content or data issues caused by pulling in your plugins after the fact?
That's a good point. I can't say yes 100%. There are, I think, at least 40,000 plugins out there. And so some of them certainly can do weird things with your content. So It's entirely possible that some of your plugins might do some weird things, but the very nice thing about all of this is that when you import it, you're not taking your site live. You're still working with a site that's just sort of your test environment, you're migrating to it, and you've got the freedom to check it out, make sure that everything works right, and if you do run into problems, you can go through and fix those as needed and troubleshoot those without having to scramble because you just broke a live site. So fortunately, your live site would be intact, and so you can troubleshoot. Cool. Any other questions about it? Yes?
I mean, I have my site, my FTP server, and I just downloaded the files, it's like just
Yeah.
doing that, the transfer has all the malicious malware on it.
Yes. If you are, so yeah, this is going to the WordPress.org to WordPress.org migration. If your site is compromised, then if you migrate it, you will be migrating whatever compromised code is in there as well, because people who are adding malicious code are either going to do that in your files or in your database somewhere, likely your files. And because you're going to move all of them, then that's carrying it with you. So yeah, migrating is a really good opportunity to help fix that. So you can get with Securi. They're a really great company to help clean up your site. And then you can migrate the stuff to the site, and it's to the new host, and then you can have Securi or whoever you want to contract go through it, fix it there, so they're not mucking around in a live site. You can get it ready for migration, and then switch over. And then once you've switched over to the new host, after you migrated, then you will be moving forward with a clean site. So that's a good way to do it. Yes?
Another way to do that, let's say, not custom, you can grab a fresh install of WordPress, grab fresh installs of the plugin,
Yeah.
get fresh install of the theme. Your custom stuff is still a problem, but if you get fresh versions of all those, then at least you know those are safe.
And that's a good point. And the XML file that you export with WordPress Importer will be clean. I can't think of much way that somebody could somehow embed like a virus in the actual post content. I'm sure it might be some way possible, but usually when your site's compromised, it's because some of the PHP files and maybe your theme or your plugins have been compromised and altered somehow. All this is doing is it's actually just going through your post table, and it's just getting your content, it's getting some of your user content as well, but it's not actually going through your files and downloading anything like that. So that should give you a sanitized way to get your posts out of a compromised site. Cool. Any other questions about moving from WordPress.com or even the WordPress Importer in general?
Just so we understand the process, including what all of these importers and migrators do, could you run through today the manual process for moving the site from
Yes.
point A to point B?
Yes, exactly, and that's where we're going now. The reason why I took a quick detour to the WordPress Importer is for people who are migrating from WordPress.com, or even people who don't have access to their files or their database. This is how you have to do it. But generally speaking, if you are going from one host to another, you will have some access to the files, or you can be given access to your files, or you can be given the dump of your files. So that's where we're going to be spending most of our time for this. So that way, no matter what plugins or anything that you're using, you can move your site. So cool. Can get back into it. Great. So WordPress Importer. So again, we talked about you want to install WordPress on your new host. This will give you a basic framework to move your stuff into. And again, if you're using WordPress Importer, this is vital. Again, most hosts have a quick install utility. I work for WP Engine. All we host are WordPress sites. So when you create a new account and a new install with us, it's automatically WordPress because that's all we host. And so you're not really going to be able to install anything else on there. When some hosts will make you create a database. So if you are creating a database, you will need to note what the database name is, what the database username is, and what the database password is. That will all come in handy when you are doing the migration. We'll get to that later, so just keep mental note. Cool. So database export. Most hosts, again, have a way to get to your database using your control panel, which could be cPanel or it could be some proprietary system. With WP Engine, which I will be using because that's what I have, I can go through my user portal and you can get to a database management. Almost exclusively it's PHPMyAdmin. I don't think I've ever worked somewhere or used as a host that doesn't have PHPMyAdmin. Basically, it's just a visual way to look at, manage, and work with your database. So you would go to the site database. You would make sure that you're selecting the database that you want to migrate. You can export it. You can do certain export methods. You can generally do custom. Anyway, the main idea is you want to migrate all of your tables from the database. So I can say that, but it's easier to show you. So this is my WP Engine user portal. I've got PHPMyAdmin, right? And this takes me to my database. So I can click on this. And actually, we've streamlined it, and it's even easier. You just click. So I'm just in the database. This is the only one I have here. I click export. I can just click go. The quick one worked fine. I've already downloaded mine just to make things easy, but that's how you would go about doing it. Cool. So.
Is there any way
Yes.
you have to prep beforehand, like with pretty permalinks or anything?
So that's a good question. That doesn't need to be prepped on the source install. The nice thing about migrations is that unless you're like installing a plugin to migrate, you don't need to do anything to your source site where you're moving from, which is great because migrations can already be pretty stressful. So you really don't want to worry about having to have any risk to your live site. So fortunately, this operation will not change your site, and you don't need to prep it in any particular way. All you're doing is you're just saying, I'm grabbing my data, I'm not changing it. So cool. And then, so that's getting your database. And like I said, there are two basic parts to a WordPress site. There's your database, and then there are your files. You will use your FTP client of choice, FileZilla, CyberDuck, WinSCP. Those are some standard ones. I generally use CyberDuck or FileZilla. They're free. It's a great way to visually manage your files. So what you can do is basically you just say, all right, you open up a window, you type in your FTP credentials, and again, your host should give you that. I'll do a walkthrough on that in just a moment. There are some certain directories you'll see once you connect. WP content contains all of your uploads, it contains your plugins, and it contains your themes. Generally speaking, if you're not doing anything too crazy, that will contain everything that you need to move your site. If you want to be totally sure, you can get everything. You can download the entire root directory of your WordPress site and re-import it. So that's something that is handy to know. There is another file, and this is if your host is using Apache. Generally speaking, that's what they're going to be using. So there's such a thing as a .htaccess file. And actually, to your question, this is where your pretty permalinks are. That's the code that generates it. htaccess files can contain things like rewrites for your URLs. Pretty permalinks is essentially just a complex rewrite structure to make it so that browsers think that you're actually have directories and things when, we all know that WordPress doesn't actually create directories for each post. It just makes it look like it. So your htaccess file has all of that. It's a hidden file. Anything that starts with a dot, doesn't have anything in front of it, is what's called a hidden file. FTP clients all have a setting that says, I want to see hidden files. So if you are doing some custom configuration with .htaccess, it's not unheard of, you will want to make sure that you are grabbing that file. Now, if all you're doing is pretty permalinks, WordPress will generate that code for you. So that's generally not something that you really need to make sure you're getting, because it's all pretty standard for WordPress. But if you're doing some custom rewrites or anything like that, you'll probably want to keep that.
Can you do custom rewrites in htaccess, or can you do it in
You can do both. Yeah, rewrites in .htaccess will tell Apache. Now Apache is the web service. That's the software that actually serves up your website. So .htaccess will make it so that your the web service Apache will actually do the rewrites. Doing it in PHP does it on a code level. They both work. One of the things you don't want to have an enormous htaccess file. This is loaded on every single page. The reason why is because you know, the web service needs to know what it should do for every page. So if you have like a crazy amount of redirects, htaccess might not be a great way to do that, but you can do them either way. Cool. Yeah, there's like a redirect plugin.
Well, would that file be?
That's in the document root. That's like the very bottom level. So you'll see like for your site, you'll see the WP content folder, you'll see index.php, you'll see WP admin, and you will see that htaccess, among other things. So also your WP config file, that's another important one, like your htaccess. It can contain custom settings. WP config.php contains WordPress configurations, as the name implies. So it can have certain things like you can tell it that you want your admin forced to SSL. You can hard code what your site's URL is in there. You can do debug log things. WP config is a gigantic topic, and I can't. There's no time to go into it here. Just know that if you have been doing some custom things with WP config, that's where they will be. Another thing, like we talked about with the database, when you create it, you have a database name, user, password. WP config is where WordPress stores those settings, because WordPress needs to know what database you're connecting to. WP config has that, so that's why you want to record the database information that you created, because you will need to put it into WP config after you migrate it. WordPress will not automatically know how to log into that, because WordPress cannot hack your database for you. Cool. So that's getting your files and getting your database. And I'm going to do a quick run through on how SFTP works. It's really straightforward. Again, I am in my user portal. cPanel, other host control panels, they have a way for you to manage SFTP users, or they might call them FTP users. Either way, that's a way for you to access the file structure. Some hosts have like a file manager that's web-based. There should be a way to download files through there. But I like SFTP. It's the most powerful one because you got a lot more control over it. So here are my SFTP users. I have one here named Jon Rod, and also my web host gives me some of this information that lets me know, okay, so this is how I need to connect. So let's connect. We're going to use FileZilla here. It's easy and it's quick. So I've got FileZilla open. I click up here. You can do quick connect, but I don't think that will work for mine because we have SFTP, and I think this tries to do FTP. So we're going to do the site manager. I can add new sites. So I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to do this. So this tells me my SFTP address is this. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it under host. It tells me my port is 2222. I'm using SFTP. My logon type is normal because I'm using a user and password, and that is the normal way to do it. I'm going to type in my user. I'm going to type in my password. I'm not going to tell you what that is. And I'm going to click OK. And so now this site has all of this information. And what I like about FileZilla is that it lets you save sites like this. CyberDuck does that too. So if you ever want to go back to it, you don't have to enter this in over and over and over. You just need to change your password if that ever changes. So I'm going to connect. And this is fine. Some people get a little freaked out by this. This just means I am connecting to this server for the first time, and it's saying, hey, this is the server you want to connect to, right? This isn't some man-in-the-middle attack. This isn't, this is who you want. So I'm saying, yes, this is, and I always trust them because it's my web host. And if I can't trust them, then I should migrate. Cool. So we are here. There are two sides to this. Generally speaking, your FTP clients will work similarly. The left side is my local environment. These are my files on my actual laptop here. And this is my WordPress site. So I've got WP admin, WP content. Here's that .htaccess file because I can view hidden files. WP config, all of this good stuff. And what's really cool too is, again, most clients will allow you to just drag and drop. So I'm going to get everything. I'm going to cheat a little, and I'm not actually going to wait for all the file transfer because we'll just be sitting around waiting for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into the back end, and I'm going to copy the files manually. This is a kind of way to cheat, but the principle is the same. So I'm going to drag. I'm going to get into this folder. I'm going to drag and drop.
I didn't know you can drag it from the window to your own folders.
Yeah, it's pretty great. It works for the Mac version. It works for the.
I've been using that for years, and I never knew that.
Yeah. So on Windows, I know for sure it does it. I don't know why it's not doing it right now. Why is it not?
Because we're watching.
I know, right? Okay. Well, either way, I can also manage it through here. So I have it under home. No, it's under users. Okay, well, yeah, it's not a live demo if it doesn't go weird somewhere. Oh yeah, user, should be home. I don't know. Oh, users. There we go. And I had it under downloads. Had it under migration and files. Done. Easy. Okay, well I can drag and drop that way. So, yeah, maybe Mac doesn't. I do through Windows a lot too. So there it is. You can see it's populating, and we're not gonna bother waiting around for all of that. We're just going to copy it. So I'm going to do my little cheat here. But what we are doing is we are moving it from this to this site called Test Migrate. And just to make sure that you all know that I'm not cheating right now, Test Migrate looks one way. It's a cat blog. I'd used that for another one. I used a cat blog template. This is a little more utilitarian. But we can see this is using a theme. This has a test post. And if I log in, we'll see that it has like plugins installed and things. But either way, they're clearly different sites. So we've got some plugins here. We've got Hello Dolly. Gives us this little quote there. It's a great plugin. Doesn't do much, but it's brightens up your day. So okay, so they're clearly different sites. With Test Migrate 1, now that I have downloaded files, we'll pretend, I will need SFTP information for Test Migrate because I am going to migrate into this site, which means I will need to go the other way with my file transfer. So again, we have all of that. So let's go back to FileZilla. It's probably still doing stuff. Yeah, it's a very small site, but it's there's a lot of files. WordPress just has a lot of files. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna use the host. Port is 2222. It's the same. Normal. Okay. We're gonna cancel this connection. We wouldn't really want to do that, but I'm tired of it. Still doing stuff. We don't really need it to. Okay. Oh, it's still actually going to be doing it. But yeah, so here we are. This is the new site. This is Test Migrate 1. And if you look up here, this will tell you. Okay. So transfer stopped. And so I'm not going to totally do this. I need to connect again. I'm not going to totally do this because again, we'll be waiting for a while. Like the download didn't even complete, the upload also wouldn't. But yeah, we're still in files, right? This is where we were downloading everything. I can just copy all of these over. I can just select everything again, drag and drop over, and it will tell me, hey, these look, you know, this is the same name file. I'm going to overwrite everything. I don't need what's on the current host. I just want my, I don't need what's on the new host. That's just my default WordPress install that I created. I want to overwrite it with everything. I always use this action. And I like to do this, apply to current queue only. That way, it won't accidentally still be on if I don't want it to overwrite things later. So there it goes. So that's pretty easy, right? Like you just drag and drop files. It works pretty much just like you're dragging and dropping files on your own desktop. An FTP client just makes it so that you can connect to a web host. You can connect to your server and you can manipulate the files there. Does anybody have any questions about the database export process, the file export? Oh, you know what, let's complete everything. Let's just do one last thing here. We have I might as well say let's do a database import, right? Because that's the other thing, right? So export files, export database, and then for importing files, we might as well just do a real quick database import. So this is again the new site, right? I'm always double checking. I do not want to mess around with my current host. I'm messing around with where I'm migrating to. So test migrate, yes, that's good. What I like to do, I like to work with a clean slate. So I'm checking everything, and I am dropping all the tables. That deletes all the tables. So again, very important that I'm saying, yes, this is test migrate. This is the new database. It's not live. So if I say drop tables, doesn't matter. It's not going to break anything important. So they're all gone. Great. So now we want to.
This is the one that you're clearing off and getting ready to bring the new stuff in.
Yes, this is where I'm moving to. So for a typical example, this is your new host where you have created a brand new WordPress install. It's all defaults, so you can trash it if you want to. It doesn't matter. We had exported from Jon Rod here, and now we're going to bring in that database here. So the data that was on test migrate wasn't important. The data that I exported from Jon Rod, that is important. So we go to import. So again, I've selected this WP test migrate database. It's the only one.
So it doesn't hurt anything if you clear it off first?
No, yeah, so with test migrate, why are they still here? Oh, you know, I didn't confirm it. Okay. This is a nice thing about PHP MyAdmin. I didn't go through this step. It says, do you really want to do this? I do, but I'm glad you asked. There, it's gone. So yeah, this won't break anything because, you know, if I haven't pointed my, you know, domain to anywhere else, doesn't matter. I'm just breaking some WordPress site somewhere else that has nothing to do with my actual live site. So I'm going to import so that we can make it my actual live site. Well, this isn't going to take it live, but this is going to clone stuff over. So I have already prepared a database export. So this is under, I need to clean this up, don't I? Database.sql. So when I had exported, like I didn't totally do it, but it will tell you, you can save the file as a .sql file, which is what you want. When you're exporting, this is the file that I exported from this site. So when I went to PHP MyAdmin to export, I exported it from there. It gave me a file. I downloaded it to my computer. I just looked in the folder where I had downloaded it. And so we can import it. Pretty easy. I'm not even going to change any of these settings. I'm going to click go. And the reason why I like to drop all the tables ahead of time,
But it is fine.
that's fine. Yeah, I don't know what quite did that, but these are all my tables. So these are, this is all the stuff that was from the previous one. And you can actually tell that it has more stuff. I had WooCommerce installed on there. That creates tables, but you can tell this is not the same database. There's a lot more stuff here than there was on the other one. So that's cool. So that is exporting your files. that is exporting your database, and that is importing your files, and that is importing your database. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yes?
Okay, so a few months ago, I had quite a big nightmare.
Okay.
I did everything that you just mentioned in the correct order. There was an issue with the fact that the new WordPress installation requires either a domain, an original domain, or a subdomain. You cannot use the system domain that the hosting company gives you. You have to actually create a subdomain of the client's domain. So I had to do that. I adjusted all of the files, the config files with the new database, the new passwords to get into the database. Permalinks I adjusted. I copied all of the database, exported, imported. But when I finished everything, the first thing that I noticed was when I would place an image using the page builder I was making, I would see it in the page builder, but then when I updated it to the live site, to the new location, the images were missing every time I placed an image. So somewhere, something was wrong. There are so many little spots where there are configurations based on the location of the new WordPress site that to find every single thing seemed to be impossible for me, because wherever I changed it, there was somewhere else where there was something from the old location was in the copy and things weren't working right.
That's interesting.
Did you do a search and change? I know that you can do those search and change.
Yeah, there's search and replace type functionality. There's certain
I didn't even
plugins
know what
that
to search for. That's
Yeah.
the problem. Unfortunately, it wasn't that easy.
Could have just been the name of where it was, and that it was being, in other words, it was inside of one of the files there, and it was saying the old name, and so it wasn't sending it to the new place.
Yeah, the problem was I thought I did everything and changed everything properly, but yet there was something not working.
There are some poorly coded plugins and themes that hard code certain file paths, like all the way to the server root, which can cause problems. Generally speaking, it should just be relative to WordPress. So things should be looking for just WP content uploads, things of that nature. I have seen stuff like that. Yeah, that can be tricky. And so in a situation like that, that will take some digging into. But again, the nice thing about migrating to, you've got a whole other site that's not live, you have some time to do some troubleshooting like that. I believe I had a question over there.
Basically what you just said, some plugins do hard code links.
Yeah.
So you have to do on SQL on the database, like a search string for your old domain.
You have to search for your old
Yeah.
name.
There are some plugins that do database search and replaces for you. There is some functionality called WP CLI if you're a little more adventurous. That lets you go in through the terminal and you can actually run WP commands. So I know with WP Engine there's sort of a way to do that, for instance. And again, this is not something most people can do. I don't even have access for it on this. But there's a way to do WP CLI somewhat.
To make a copy of an original site somewhere else work perfectly, the only way I was able to get that to work perfectly, and I don't even know how, was with Updraft Plus.
Some plugins can, yeah, and some
somehow
plugins
that
do
just
search and replace.
moved it to my hard drive and then moved it to the new place and everything worked. But manually, it's important to know, to get under the hood and to know what you're doing. And I still don't know what I should have done that I didn't do.
So
You
we're
have to
actually,
do a search and replace.
yeah.
Because some of your stuff is going to be hard coded into the major files, the major direct file, and it's not really that hard to do. It's usually in PHP MyAdmin. Isn't there a search in there that you can do?
Yeah.
Query.
You can
do it
search.
under query.
Or you
and
can do
those
search and
searches,
you can.
put in the name of your old site or something.
Yeah,
And
so,
then it will find wherever it exists, and it's usually only, I ran into the same problem, and it existed in about 5 or 6 places.
yeah.
And I had to go and make those changes, but that's all it was, 5 or 6 places. Okay, it took me 2 days to get there to figure that out,
about
but,
But, yeah, so I'm gonna,
but once it was figured out, it wasn't
Yeah, and I'm actually gonna go there as well, because there are some things we have to do clean up. Yes.
I missed something from before.
Okay, yeah.
Why Updraft Plus? My understanding,
Oh.
correct me if I have this wrong, my understanding with Updraft, you download when you back up 6 different files. Boom. And you can restore them. But why doesn't that just do the whole thing?
I'm not sure. I haven't used Updraft Plus. That was just the
Why can't you
example
just do it
he.
manual? Why do you need Plus? Why can't you? Yes.
Updraft Plus is just a paid version, and Updraft, the normal one, you can, it has limitations, like you can only do one site, you can only move one site.
I got one site.
Right. There are other limitations with the regular, with the free one.
There are some other
I can't
migration
remember what it is
plugins
right
too.
now, but I know it was a deal change.
Ask me later.
So what I think I hear you telling me, tell me if I don't have this right, it's important that the files that I've downloaded from, backed up from Updraft, I can't restore them somewhere else and expect it to work.
I mean, I'm not really super familiar with Updraft.
It should work.
But yeah, like if you have Updraft, Updraft should be giving you exports that it can understand and read. So it should be pretty universal. That's how most backup or migration plugins work that require exports and things. It will export it in a format that it can read somewhere else. Do you have a question?
Well, that's,
Okay.
it's
Cool.
so simple.
So yeah, we're one of the things also is that we exported this database entirely, and we're importing it somewhere else. And if we want to play around with it, sometimes we will need to change the URL. So the options table here has some basic stuff. So jonrod.com, that's great. That is my domain. But on Test Migrate 1, that domain does not exist here. So if I actually try to go to this site, and I click on that, it'll show me, see, this is what it should look like, right? You know, this was the new site. It's got the new theme, has this test post, doesn't have that old, title. But when I try to go to the dashboard, it takes me to jonrod.com. I haven't messed with my DNS at all. I haven't pointed the domain. So this just takes me right back to the old host, so I can't troubleshoot. So if I wanted to change the name, I would need to be in phpMyAdmin, and I could change them here. I could change this to testmigrate1.wpengine.com. And to your point, yes, you can totally, if I want to change all of those, I can do a search for them. And I can search for, oh, this is just in WP options. If I go back to the database as a whole, and I click search, it will let me search. I can select all, I can do all of my tables, and I can look for jonrod.com. And it has some little operations there that you can make it more specific, but I just want to say jonrod.com, where is it? Excuse me. And naturally, yes, there are 2 lines in 2 matches in WP options. Those are the ones that we were looking at. That is where your domain is set in the database. Now, like I mentioned, in the WP config file, there are also ways of setting that in there, but this is generally how you're doing it.
So you can do it here or directly in the WP.
Yeah, you have to do one or the other. If you're doing it in WP config, it will hard code it. It will override anything here.
In there.
So, yeah, so that's what that's something to keep in mind. Also, another thing, excuse me, since the way that I copied over all of the files also got my WP config file, that WP config file has the database credentials from my current host, my original host. It does not have the database credentials for wherever I'm moving it to. How could it? So what we would need to do is we would need to go into our file here, and we can use FileZilla to do this. So I'm connected to, close the connection and reconnect. So we would need to go into WP config here, and I'm just going to be in and out real fast because, I just want to edit it. So there are some database credentials. I'm going to hop out of that real fast because it actually has a database password. And I'm going to change that. So for the video, that's not going to be the same. Not even that you really could get in here from there anyway, but you know, if a password's ever exposed like that, might as well reset it, no matter how secure you think it is. So that's going to be changed. But yeah, so that's where you would go in and you can edit it. And again, like I said, you can use the FileZilla to edit that. So it's not just for file transfer, you can also edit files on your host with this. So it's a really useful tool. So at this point, we have, we're going to edit these actually real quick. So I'm going to change these to test migrate 1. And at that point, we will have the site fully migrated from one location to another. And let's do that. Because WP Engine aggressively caches, I'm probably going to need to purge the cache real fast on my end. So I'm going to do that real quick here. So, okay. So now, like before, when I went here and I tried to log in, it took me to jonrod.com. I'm going to do incognito because my browser probably cached some stuff. So I'm going to go to WP admin, and there it is. Look at that. And I have a user. So here's the other thing. Because I migrated the database users are also carried over. So even if I had set up a user on this new site, it'll have been completely blown away, and I'll just log in with the same user that I used at my current host, which is, for me, it's Jon Rod. Oh, and I need to, oh, I don't have it there anymore. That's fine. I'll just grab it from my last pass. Okay, so I'm logging in. And this will also show us, this will confirm that we have all of our plugins that we would expect. We should. There they are. And they're active, so all of that is moved over. Yes?
So correct me if I'm wrong. So really, you could use a WordPress site that you have, and you could migrate it and change it, use it as a template for other websites.
You
All
can.
you have to do is go through WP config, change the URL, and some other stuff, and just replicate stuff as many times as you want.
Yeah,
All the
absolutely.
plugins, everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you can like how I have in my my folder here, I have the files. So I had the files, and I had the there it is. I had the files and database in there. So if I wanted to just move that to a lot of different places, if I wanted to use it as a template, I could do that too. So a migration is basically like a clone site sort of operation. But if you change the name, then yeah, you're basically cloning it. Cool.
Is there documentation for this that shows you how to do it?
Yeah, there should be documentation like that for site migrations on the WordPress Codex.
You want to change the WP config.
Yeah, there's a article on WP config that shows how to do that. And there's also how to change your site URL. That's in the WordPress Codex. So there is stuff like that for sure. And I can actually, so WordPress Codex is awesome. Change site URL.
Nice.
And you can just Google that, changing the site URL, and it will tell you, you can do it either through the database or, see these are the defines here. You can also do it through changing them directly in the database. And actually, I pulled, I think, some of my stuff from here. It's in the same format. So yeah, they even say PHP MyAdmin because that's the
So
standard.
it changes all the permalinks, everything. Oh,
Yeah, because it based on that. Now there could be some hard-coded stuff. That is where searching in the database is handy. So I searched for my old domain, and it will tell me everywhere else it is, because there's something in here. So that's so my domain could be other places, but my site did get you can see that. Oh, I didn't. I had an incognito. So let me test migrate 1. And you remember I have a post in there. And so we should expect this post to go to /test from test migrate 1. It shouldn't be jonrod.com. But sure enough, it isn't. Oh, I don't have the pretty permalinks. Let me turn that on. Wow.
Just remember that you're going to need a domain name where you're moving the site to. It will not work with the hosting company's system domain that they give you for free when you sign up. You have to have a domain and/or subdomains for WordPress to work. And that was a major confusion for me.
So this is just the one they gave me. I will want to use my main domain, but this works fine. So this is WordPress working.
Because you have a domain, it's wpengine.com. But what if you had, pixel.com, and you were moving it to another hosting company?
Yeah, you have to have it. Yeah, so my WP Engine provides a temporary, a test URL like this for each of your installs. But yeah, if you're moving from somewhere and you don't control the domain, then yes, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we got pretty deep on that. So file export, we did the database import, we did the file import, and actually, yeah, so that's all stuff we had done. You click the import tab. We talked about editing the WP config, how these are very important. These are your database credentials. That needs to make sure that you are doing that. Also, there was another thing called dbhost. dbhost is the actual server. Usually it's this address. This is what's called localhost. That means that the database is served up from the same place as your web server. If it's not, then you'll know. Like you'll have been told, because that is a very custom setup. Okay. And that's pretty much it. Like I mentioned, our site is migrated, and so we moved all the content, right? So the files and database have moved over. We saw that my plugins moved over. We saw that the posts moved over. My user was changed because it was overwritten, based on everything. So everything is exactly like how it was on jonrod.com. And actually, we can compare. So that's migrate. This is jonrod.com. Log in.
Are these slides posted somewhere?
Yeah, I can make sure that that's happened. So this is the exact same site. So we saw that they look different from the start, and now they are exactly the same. They've got the same plugins. That's all it took. So from there, we do want to talk about domains real fast. So let's say I actually did want to use jonrod.com. So I would just undo what I did. I'll go to my options, and I'm going to change this back to jonrod.com. So this will actually be a migration, right? I will have changed it so that my domain was pointed to one place, and now it's pointed to another. So jonrod.com. Now, with my setup here, this install has my domains listed. Because they're on the same account, it won't let me do domains in more than one install because it's confusing for it. So I'm deleting them from here. This is not really something you would need to mess with. Generally speaking, you don't really need to move your site around within your same host. I'm just doing this for my own convenience. So now I'm on here. Most hosting providers will also have a similar situation where you need to tell it, well, what domain are you using for this site? I am using jonrod.com. Also important, I would like it so that if somebody goes to www.jonrod.com, that they will also get to this location. It's better to.
Did it have an automatic redirect in there?
You can make it redirect. So I can make it so that redirect. So that's a WP Engine thing. I believe some other hosts.
That's a WP Engine thing. You can just do it in there.
Yeah. So www automatically redirects to jonrod.com.
And so if you do that, then even the pretty permalinks, let's say for a post or something like that, is going to be able to follow through.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It back references it, which means that if I go to jonrod.com/page, if I go to www.jonrod.com/page, it'll take me to jonrod.com/page. Again, that's a WP Engine thing. But I think there are other places that do that. But that's a redirect. It's pretty
If I had to
straightforward.
write that myself,
What's that?
if I had to write it myself,
It wouldn't be terribly complicated. We're getting into more regex, which is that's a whole other topic, but it's doable anywhere. You could do it through.
it's doable.
Yeah, you could do it through htaccess. You could do it through your website. Okay, so what we have here is we added our domain here, but the problem is that, well, here's actually an issue for my setup is these are on the same server, so an actual DNS change, it's not really going to be necessary. But one thing we might want to do is, just because I've added the domain here on this host does not mean it's live. All that means is that this server now knows that if traffic comes in on jonrod.com, this is the site to use. But I'm kind of a nervous guy when it comes to migrations. I like to make sure that it goes perfect every time. And what better way to make sure that it goes perfectly is to actually see how the site looks before you make a global DNS change. But here's the challenge. We changed the URL, and actually, we want to see how the site looks on the right URL. It doesn't do me much good if the site works on testmigrate1.wpengine.com. I want to know how it looks on jonrod.com. There is a little slightly advanced kind of thing called a hosts file. That is a file on your local computer. It's on Windows, it's on Mac. Mac is actually really easy because I've got a program called Gas Mask. It is great. I don't know why it's called Gas Mask. That's weird. But what it lets me do is it lets me say, my computer will resolve domains wherever I want them to. I don't care what the rest of the internet says. I want my domain to go to this IP. And again, your hosting provider should let you know what IP you're on. So if I go to jonrod.com, it's going to go to that IP, no matter what global DNS says for anybody. And I'm going to save that. That has applied it to my host file. That's something you can look up. There's a lot of great tutorials on it. Essentially, it's a text file. So that's it. You just say.
This is internal, so you're going to just go inside your computer to it.
Right, yeah, this is a local file, and again, this only changes things for you specifically. This is great for testing because you want to make sure that only you are going there, and that's definitely a feature, not a bug. So you go to jonrod.com, and again, it's not a super great example because they were on the same server and the same IP anyway. But if we were talking about a situation where this was a different server, I would now be looking at the site from that other IP, guaranteed. So when I'm seeing this now, and I'm seeing that everything looks exactly like it should, I click on a page, see there's a problem, right?
It said before,
Uh-oh.
it said that there was a problem.
Maybe I should give access.
Oh, you know what? I think maybe I did something with the database wrong. Is that right?
You need to put S for security.
You can. There's no problem there. And I do have HTTPS. Oh, that's not good. I don't want caps lock. That's a problem. Oh. So yeah, you can do that. You can do that here. It defaults to HTTP, but oh, that's interesting.
Sometimes when they have that, isn't it sort of like a recursive redirect? Like
Yeah, this
somewhere.
is. Oh, you know what? I think. I don't know why this would be doing it, but I'm going to.
Over there it says see failed check. It says failed check.
Oh, this is, yeah, that's just because it's, so our system has, it checks DNS for you to see, is it pointed to the right place? It's too recent for it to know that. So I'm going to remove that redirect. I'm going to, well, this is not typical. Oh, there it goes, okay. So I don't know what it was, but so it's working. If I go to the, that was weird. I think that's cache stuff, actually.
So your computer thinks that jonrod.com is going to your new site, which is not really jonrod.com yet.
Right, exactly. So it's going, yeah, it's going to the new server. Let me, all right, I flushed the cache because I think maybe that might be, because I remember I did that when I changed it to test migrate, but I didn't say that I did it because I actually, oh my goodness. Oh, you know what? I think that is actually a cache thing. Oh, so my, so WP Engine aggressively caches everything. Oh, there's some setting in here that I didn't change. Test migrate. You know, let me check. I'm checking my WP config file now, because maybe that's in there. No. Okay, so I'm going to do something real fast. I'm gonna purge our cache on this, and actually I can do that through the user portal too. This is a WP Engine thing, so it's not terribly relevant for you all. But caching, you're probably using caching. Yeah, you should be. WP Super Cache, W3 Total Cache, stuff like that's pretty good. So I cleared that, and I'm just making sure everything's set up. Well, okay. So let's try that again. I'm gonna Command-Shift-R to do a force refresh, and you know what? Just because I'm going to test this in incognito. Well, yeah, JonRod.com. Okay, so there it is. It was just caching, like because you guys noticed, I didn't actually change any configurations, but it is now doing that. So cool. So it's moved over.
If it works here, then you don't have to worry when you move the domain over to this, the real
Right.
domain.
Exactly. So I know for a fact that with my host file edited like it is, I'm seeing it on the new server. And so if I've essentially changed the DNS, but only for myself. So if I say, oh, I can change the DNS for everybody, then that will work. And so I changed it to this IP. So I use Cloudflare. I like it a lot, but basically you just go to your DNS host, wherever that may be. Cloudflare's cool, it uses CNAMEs even for your root domains, but in this case, you know, we could just do a typical A record. So this is the at just means that's my root domain. You can see JonRod.com now points with here, and so now it's live. And so my host file trick, what I generally do is I then delete it from here just because it's redundant, and I don't want to have it bite me if I ever change anything in the future. So now it's been migrated, domain's been pointed, and we're good. And everything, there was a few little weird hiccups, but you know, it wasn't that hard. It was, you know, within a few minutes-ish. So cool. Does anybody have questions about all of that?
Nice job, John.
Preview site, host file. Oh, here, so on Windows, I actually have it here. This is where your host file is on Windows, if you're using Windows. So that's what you want. And then point your DNS. Again, same deal. A record. Oh, and so here's why I have it set this way. Excuse me. A CNAME record doesn't do a redirect or anything. I think there's a common misconception there I've heard, where people think that makes it like redirect or something. All this says is that www.jonrod.com will always go to the same server as jonrod.com. And I've never seen a setup where people want that going to two different locations, so it's just easier to do that. And because that will always go to where jonrod.com goes, I just needed to change this record, and now it's fine. So I didn't need to change two records, I just needed to change one. So there we are, now it's all set. Cool, so that's migrating your site. I did mention that there are some plugins. I think we spent a lot of our time on the actual, you know, doing the manual migration. So there are some free ones. On1 WP migration, that will only move a site that's up to 512 megabytes. There's also Duplicator. There's a paid plugin called VaultPress. It's through Automatic. It's really cool. It's like either a subscription model or a, or you can just do, I think, a one-time payment. But one thing I want to show you all real quick about these sorts of things is, like somebody mentioned, these will generally let you do a, actually log in and we can do it here. These will actually let you do a search and replace. So without having to go into the database or anything, I can actually tell it, change it from jonrod.com to testmigrate1.wpengine.com, and that will make it so that across the entire database it will look for all of that, and it will will replace it. So I'm going to do Duplicator. That one looked pretty cool, actually. We'll just see some of the settings, just real fast, just so you can see. And it should It should be asking you for the same type of things as the other, like, you know, with our migration, where it will actually this is interesting. It'll let you back up to Amazon things. It's nice. Here you go. So SQL, well, yeah. I'm going to do the other one. WP, what's it, migrate, all on WP migration. But either way, these are all pretty, they have, you know, a lot of documentation. Oh, WP migration. Another thing to always keep in mind, they're updated. They're compatible with this version. You know, plugins are changing all the time. Whatever is the best plugin now, and they're not all the best for everybody. They might not be the best for you later. So yeah, you can do a search and replace here. You can export. And yeah, you can use FTP here. So I can export it to, so I guess this has a, but either way, so you can export it to like Dropbox, or you can export it to a file.
Does it change the links inside the database or also inside the PHP files?
Oh, it won't change in the PHP files. Yeah, so the database should be where everything is actually setting the URL, because as we could see with the database, it really shouldn't need to. It shouldn't need to use other. It shouldn't need to hard code it, because it can always reference what the actual URL is in that options table. Right, it says this is the domain. Why should it need to hard code it in a file? But yeah, so well, either way, yeah. Sorry, I haven't done too much research into the plugins, but as we can see, this actually, you know, worked in terms of, you know, everything moved over. And if you want to have some, you know, if you want to do it with like a plugin or something, that makes it simpler. You know, as long as you know, use the plugin and you've gone through the documentation, but I don't think we have time for that. So cool. Yeah, that's everything for me. Any questions about the whole process? Yes, back there. Oh, you, yes.
I was just curious if you had any experience migrating from Apache to Nginx.
Yeah, so Nginx is what WP Engine uses at the top layer. And so the really nice thing, we use Apache in the back end too, though, so htaccess will still work. One of the things, though, is that WordPress doesn't particularly care. All of the files still work the same. I mean, as long as it can run PHP, as long as it has MySQL, it'll work. You would likely need to do something custom with the htaccess stuff. Again, the htaccess manages your pretty permalinks and things like that. Nginx doesn't care about htaccess because it's not Apache. So if you're converting that, you would likely want to look up WordPress Nginx, and you'd likely get that. Yeah.
I've seen the symlink redirects.
Sure.
And I was just wondering if you've had any experience with it being flaky or.
No, Nginx is great. Nginx is really good for static stuff too, so it's great with cached responses. But yeah, the only major difference as far as WordPress is concerned is just the htaccess.
Okay, and you haven't run into any, no problem with plugins or any of the other stuff either?
No, not that I have, but again, so our stack is Nginx with Apache in the backend, so it's still getting kind of the benefit of both.
Okay.
But we really like Nginx. Actually, I believe we're going to be moving away from Apache at some point. I think we're going to be using PHP at PM, something like that. But either way, yeah, so, you know, Apache is just kind of incidental.
Did you, when you used Nginx, have you seen a significant increase in throughput?
Oh yeah, and that's so, like I said, WP Engine is aggressively caching everything, which means that for most stuff, more people are getting cache responses than not. And because Nginx is so much more efficient with cached, with static responses, which is what a cache response is, yeah, it lets us do a lot more throughput, a lot more simultaneous connections, because Apache can be really heavy even if it's a cache response.
Every thread. Yeah.
Exactly. So Nginx is super lightweight. I like it a lot.
Yeah, whereas Apache, every time you add a user, it increases the demand both in memory and processor. Nginx pretty much gives you constant. So it's at least 2 times faster.
Yeah. And so again, we use Apache in the backend because Apache is really great when it needs to do the heavy lifting of actually executing the PHP, running the MySQL queries. Nginx is not as good for that, so we try to get the best of both worlds.
Okay.
So where Apache is saying, okay, when something is not cached, that means that it needs to execute the PHP code, and it needs to query the database. But what we say is that, okay, so the home page is going to look the same for everybody. So the first person that views the home page, okay, we need to build this all out, but then we're going to save it. We're going to take like a snapshot of it, and then everybody else who views that page for the next 10 minutes or so, they get the snapshot because it's not going to change. And so we don't have to do PHP, MySQL the whole time. And so Nginx is really great at that part. And then Apache was really good for that very first part where it needs to build everything. So, but yeah,
If you do a lot of changes, Apache's better.
Yeah, and so if you have
Updating your site.
I mean, they're both good. Like I said, we use both. But yeah, it's good for stuff where it's like, yeah, you need to do a lot of PHP and MySQL, then Apache's good for that. But Nginx, you're also serving a lot of static files too. All your images, all your CSS, all your JavaScript, those are static. So Nginx is really great at delivering those. Yeah, not quite migration. But yeah, that's a fair point though. If you're moving between different types of softwares, WordPress will run on a lot of things. So generally speaking, as long as you're making sure that your plugins and the core software requirements for all your site are matched by your server, you're going to be fine for the most part. I haven't seen a problem where it hasn't been. But one other quick thing, actually, because that's another thing. So we've actually been running into some issues where we do a lot of internal migrations where we move people around to different servers. We have a PHP 5.6 offering, but we've released PHP 7, which is fantastic. But we do run into problems where PHP 7 has dropped a lot of deprecated code. So PHP 5.6 has a lot of stuff in it that PHP 7 does not care about anymore. It will not do it. And so we have certainly seen issues where if somebody moves from PHP 5.6 to PHP 5.6 to 7, some of their stuff can break. We actually have a plugin. This is not something that we sell. This is free for everybody. We sell some, so it's in the WordPress plugin repository. It's called the PHP Compatibility Checker. Again, we built it, but anybody can use it. We don't care. Have it on GoDaddy, have it on Bluehost, have it wherever. It's just a nice thing that we wanted to make. PHP Compatibility Checker will do a check. It'll roll through. It'll see, does it look like your site is good for PHP 7 or even other versions? And it'll give you like a little report letting you know which theme, if your theme or if your plugins, if any of those look bad and why.
6 is about to go out of...
Yeah, 6 is, nobody really cared about 6.
Well, yeah,
we just went from 5 to 7 basically.
They're going to stop supporting it in like a year.
Yeah, 6 is, nobody, it's kind of it's the middle child of the PHP family.
6 was dropped.
What would you recommend? What would you recommend
Yes.
to migrate Flywheel?
Flywheel? So migrating from to or from, or really,
Uploading from Flywheel to make it live.
So yeah, all of these steps will work for just about any host. As long as your host gives you SFTP access and database access, and I believe Flywheel does, you can do all of these same steps, and you can import to them, you can export from them, and all of this will work. So yeah, they'll let you do that, and then you'd cap it off with making sure that your domain is with their control panel and there with the right install, and then you change your DNS and you're good, and that should take care of it. Yes?
Way back to the beginning, when you were talking about the importer.
Yes.
So, I'm super cool with migrating the whole site. I usually use Updraft Plus, works great.
Okay. Sounds like that's what a lot of people are using. I should have looked more into that. That's a good tip, by the way. That's, I hear a lot of.
Love it. But what I have occasionally run into is, let's say I'm building a new site and I've been working on it for a month or two, and I don't want to bring over all the content from the old site, just let's say the blog posts, with their featured images and their images in the media library. And the WordPress importer does a very bad job of partial imports like that.
It does. You're absolutely right. WordPress importer, I'm not a, oh, I need to add. I'm not a huge fan of it. It's not a great tool, but but it is like, oh, there it is. But it's a tool. Wait, that's not it. So you're right. Let me double check. I know there are ways to. What on earth? Why is it?
I think even in particular with the featured images, people have found solutions. Yeah, that. If you just try to import the post.
Just images. Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. There is a way to do media, and you can tell it to. Yeah, media will do that. You can. You got it. Yeah, you can export media.
There was a plugin that added images to this.
Yeah, I agree. Media is something that I saw. It's not super recent, but semi-recently I noticed it added like a separate section for media, and you can tell it that you want to export media by month or so, and that would do it. So you could have two separate XML files. One has whatever kind of post stuff you want. You can do categories and different things, or your pages.
What did you just want, featured images only?
No, but I mean, look, I can get the media because I can FTP that over there. But
Yeah,
then
well,
they're not in the media library. But you can do
yeah,
that,
that's,
and then the featured
that's the
images
problem.
are no longer associated with their posts.
Oh,
That's
featured.
what
Yeah, okay, that's
reconnect,
fair.
You gotta reconnect everything. I haven't figured out how to do that at all.
Yeah, it's really all about the featured images that
Let me see.
Yeah, the images only come in
most
and
of the
you have to
solutions
reconnect
I've
them all
found
by
end up
hand.
leaving those unconnected.
Let's look at this. Oh, see,
the
here's
numbers
this is what I was talking about. This is not something that I would want to put on my site personally. But there are certain things you can do with importing XML files. This is only really if you're using WP CLI, which again, I know that's not a great answer, but it's something that I've done personally where I've had people export the entire thing with the XML, and then you can use WP CLI. And again, this is pretty advanced stuff where you can import. And again, this is if you've got command line access to your site, where you can import based on certain things. Where I can tell it I want to import based on certain parameters. Like I want to only import. So even though I've exported the entire everything, I can tell it to import and only do certain. I can have them skip. What's over here? I can have it skip everything except posts. But yeah, so not great. I agree. The whole export import functionality with the XML stuff, it could use a lot of work. But the way I position it, it's a way to get some content off of a site to a new site if you don't have any other recourse. Not super fun, but it's better than nothing. So, well, cool. I think that's about all the time we have. Really glad there was a lot of really good questions. I feel like, yeah, I didn't realize it was going to be, we're getting so in depth, but that's awesome. I wasn't totally sure what people might want to know exactly, but I feel like we got some really cool, ground covered. So, all right, I hope that was useful. I hope that's going to help you all out for your migrations. But
Thank you. It's great.